by committing to climate action. That means that SMEs who join the hub commit to halving their emissions by 2030 to then reach net zero by 2050, and also they commit to reporting their progress on a yearly basis. So why have we launched this new campaign that you're now supporting with your respective organizations, the SME Climate Ambition Drive? Well, many of you will know that SMEs account for about 90% of businesses worldwide, and it is estimated that they also account for between 50% and 64% of total emissions in the business sector. So it's really fair to say that we won't be able to reach our collective net zero goals without SMEs. And so we need to make sure that we mobilize these smaller players, these smaller businesses across value chains and across networks to tackle the so-called Scope 3 emissions. And this is precisely why we started the SME Climate Ambition Drive. We want to activate our own partner network to ensure that we can work with a number of organizations that are aware of the work that we do to engage SMEs in the respective supply chains, value chains, and networks. Our goal is to mobilize 10,000 SMEs to make the SME climate commitment on the hub by COP29, so by November, and we'll be very much relying on you all to do this. We also hope that you will help create additional incentives to encourage these SMEs to take action and make the commitment on the hub. We already have over 8,000 commitments on the hub, so if each one of you is able to bring on board about 30 SMEs, well, we will reach this ambitious target, 10,000 SMEs by COP29. We're very aware that we need to help you so that you can help us achieve this goal. So during today's conversation, we want to make sure that you're aware of all the resources that are available to you, the guidance that we've created, so that you can engage SMEs as part of this campaign. And we'll be highlighting specific examples of what's been successful in bringing SMEs on board to work towards net zero. You'll be hearing from some fantastic partners and colleagues, including Tessa Ferry, who's Race to Zero lead in the high-level climate champions team. She'll discuss the importance of SME action in the lead up to COP29. You'll be hearing from Lydia Elliott, who's Deputy Director of Supply Chain Decarbonization at the Women Business Coalition, who's the host organization for the hub. She will walk you through the different resources that we've created for campaign supporters. And you'll also hear from our wonderful partners, Louise Rabender, who's director at the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and Thomas Souhi, who's global sustainability leader at IKEA, on how they've managed to mobilize SMEs across their networks. Of course, there will be plenty of time for questions. We'll have a dedicated Q&A section, and we love to hear from you also. We'd love for you to share your insights and your experience in engaging SMEs, so we'll make sure that there is enough time for an interactive discussion. But to get us started, I'm handing it over to Tessa Ferry, once again, Race to Zero lead, an official partner not only of the SME Climate Hub, but also of the SME Climate Ambition Drive campaign. Tessa, over to you.
Thanks, Pamela. It's so nice to be on the call today. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. So as Pamela says, I lead the Race to Zero campaign, which is a global campaign mobilising non-state actors to take ambitious net zero action. And I'm sure many of you are already involved with this. And if you're not, you should definitely join. So I'm actually speaking today on behalf of the high-level champion for COP29, so that's Nigar. Unfortunately, she would have loved to have joined, but wasn't able to do so today. So I think rather than me speaking first, I'd actually suggest we play a video where she will set out her thoughts on SMEs.
Enabling and empowering SMEs to take ambitious climate action and unlock the opportunities of a green transition is a key priority ahead of COP29. SMEs employ 70% of workers and contribute to 50% of GDP globally. They are vulnerable to climate impacts, and their contribution to reducing emissions and delivering climate solutions is not fully realized. By building awareness of the need to climate-proof small businesses, I want to support SMEs to unlock their competitive advantage and future future-proof their work. I'm calling on large corporations, global institutions, and regional actors to increase capacity building for SMEs and calling on SMEs to take action today. This is why I'm pleased to partner with the SME Climate Hub and launch the Climate Ambition Drive. Through this drive, I encourage all actors to engage and support the SMEs to take the SME climate commitment and join the race to zero. Capacity building of SMEs, aligning with existing mechanisms to equip them with necessary tools, are key pillars of my Climate Proofing SMEs campaign.
So I think we've heard directly there from the high-level champion, and I'll just explain a little bit more detail very quickly about the overarching campaign. So ahead of COP29 and actually building towards COP30 as well, we have the high-level champion has launched a campaign called Climate Proofing SMEs, and this is really in recognition. Maybe go to the next slide. Of the critical role that SMEs will play in the transition to net zero, but also in building a more resilient future. So we know that SMEs, I think, are the kind of backbone of the economy, making up the majority of businesses and employment, and cumulatively of GDP and emissions, particularly in developed economies. But we also know, I think, as the transition to net zero progresses, risks being left behind, not just from the impacts of climate change that are already going to happen, but because of the changing business models, of the technologies, of the regulatory and policy requirements that are going to place burdens on SMEs as well. So the core idea of the campaign of Climate Proofing SMEs is how do we shift that conversation and make sure we're doing so with SMEs directly leading it. So next slide. So the way that the High Level Champions campaign will look is built into kind of three broad categories. So the first will be really focused on capacity building. The second will be on celebrating leadership and how do we mobilize and showcase the leadership of SMEs. And the third one is around how do we work with others, particularly large organizations, to support SMEs within and through value chains. And you can see here in the kind of outcomes that we're trying to build by COP, and I think we'll share the slides, so I won't go into detail. We are trying to look at kind of consolidating resources. We're trying to look at things like case studies and showcasing. And you can see here in this middle pillar around celebrating leadership is where we really welcome the SME Climate Hub Ambition Drive, which we see as a key pillar of this overall campaign, and we're very pleased to have launched that with you. I think it was last week ahead of New York Climate Week, and we actually see that then cutting across into some of these other categories as well. So obviously for a slide deck we've put the outcomes in one place, but we see that supporting the catalytic collaborations as well as the capacity building as well. So maybe next slide. And then just to give you this kind of broader sense of this bigger picture, so we've obviously launched the Climate Ambition Drive campaign. This is something that's coming through more and more in terms of the narrative that the High Level Champion is talking about. Today, we also launched the SME Employment Drive with our partner Geeky. And at New York Climate Week next week, we will be hosting a flagship event. So if anybody's in New York, please do register for that on SMEs, and a second campaign on impact makers. And then just a bit of a timeline moving ahead. So we're working towards New York Climate Week, then over into Baku. We'll be supporting some other events. I think this week there's also the SME, there's a finance forum that will focus on SMEs. And then we will be building a drumbeat throughout the year towards COP29, and we really want to show by COP30 the catalytic impact of the campaign. So while we'll aim to get to 10,000 SME commitments by COP29, maybe we can even think about what that might look like for the year ahead. So very happy to answer any questions. I think now I will be passing over to Lydia Elliott, who is the Deputy Director of Supplier Decarbonisation in the We Meet Business Coalition. So over to you, Lydia.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tessa. Hi, I'm Lydia Elliott, and I work on the SME Climate Hub. And as part of that, I really focus on the tools that SMEs need to take action and how we can digitally deliver those tools. And to get us started, we were going to share a poll with you all that's really focused on asking the question of, what challenges have you encountered through previous engagement with SMEs on taking climate action? So this is really giving you a chance to give us any info, experiences you've had in engaging with SMEs on climate action, and any barriers that you feel like you've encountered along the way. It really helps us learn and grow and make sure we have the right tools in place. And also feel free to fill it out and say you haven't started engaging SMEs yet and this is your first go, because that's really interesting for us too. I'll leave the poll open as I kind of run through the presentation, and then we'll use all of the really great information and insights that you give to us to kind of help inform how we're working with supporters and how we're pulling together resources in the future. So really, I'm going to talk you through a little bit of a walkthrough of the SME Climate Hub and to help you mobilize your SMEs to take action. And to get us started, I'm just going to go through some basics. So getting us started on really what is the heart of this ambition drive, which is the SME climate commitment. This is what we're driving all the SMEs to try and do and to sign up to. And it is really quite simple in essence. It's to halve their greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, achieve net zero emissions before 2050, and they can pick 2030, 2040, or 2050 as their net zero date, and to disclose their progress on a yearly basis. And this is all recognized by the Race to Zero, UN Race to Zero campaign. Now, one of the pieces that's often where we get the most questions around this is, what does that accountability report back on a yearly basis mean? This is linked into our SME Climate Hub reporting tool. This is a tool that we've built up with a series of partners over the years and is really tailored to SME reporting. We've got lots of guidance on the tool and we can always go into it more in the questions, but the two things I really wanted to highlight to you is that it has this ability to be really flexible for SMEs, both in the topics that it has. So it has mandatory topics, which are things like target setting, scope 1 and 2 emissions, and kind of results. So it really focuses them in on the areas where we think are the most important. And then it has non-mandatory areas that they can fill in that are more around kind of more mature SME actions, like getting into scope 3 or management strategy and climate risk or climate solutions. We also have flexible ways of delivering the reporting. So we have reporting tools for micro SMEs, for a normal larger SME, and we also have a way for SMEs to submit PDF reports and answer a few questions if they already have an existing report that covers all this information, trying to decrease that reporting burden that is increasingly falling on SMEs. Next slide, please. Then we found in the past, as we've done this work over the last years, that asking for an SME to make the climate commitment without also pairing it with support isn't always the most successful strategy. So it's incredibly important to balance asking them to make this commitment, but also bringing in that support and that capacity building alongside it. And as part of that, we've developed a series of action tools on the SME Climate Hub. So we have a carbon calculator, short practical action guides, a course which has 7 modules called Climate Fit that really gets to the basics of what an SME might need to know, from understanding what net zero means for their operations, to supply chains, to topics like messaging. And we also are developing sector-specific courses. We have one live right now in the film and TV production industry, and we're developing 3 more in that industry and in the food and beverage manufacturing sector. So, and then we also have a financial support guide. And all of these are being pulled together into a new space that we're launching called the Action Space, which we're quite excited about and we'll be launching in October, and we'll pull all these resources together. So you can see that we have these kind of capacity building resources that we pair with the commitment. Now, I am going to share my screen and to give you guys a kind of proper walkthrough of the supporters page and all the different things you'll encounter on the SME Climate Hub. So this is the page that you should land on when you become an SME Climate Hub supporter. Hopefully you'll have seen it already. And this is really a unique page that you get sent to, and it has a lot of information and resources that are kind of built in there. And I'm just going to sort of talk you through them as a starting off point. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is that you have here like a unique link that's your unique link. Now, the more that you can use this in your communications out to SMEs, when you're driving them to take action, the better, because that will help us track this the best. So that will help us track different supporter activities, and it will really help us gather that data well. Then the next step is really where we are now. So it's all about getting started. So you've all done that. You've registered for this webinar, and this is really where we're going to kind of talk through some of the resources. Now, I'm going to switch to one of our other pages just to show you a little bit about what we have on our Mobilize Your SMEs page, because I think when we're talking about getting started, it can be a really useful place to answer some questions. And I just wanted to also highlight that you should have received an email with the same information when you signed up to be a supporter. And as part of that email, it also has a link back through to that supporter resources page. So if you ever feel like you've lost it, it should all be in that email, as well as kind of some of the key information about these steps. The Mobilize Your SMEs page is one that we have created with the idea of it being a place for lots of guidance for stakeholders trying to mobilize their SMEs. And this is really pulling together all the different questions, areas we've been asked for more information on, and putting it into one place so it's really easy to access and really easy to understand what we mean by all the different parts of the SME Climate Hub. So this covers a few areas I'm going to highlight. So one is understanding the basics, and that has some really great guides and pieces of information in it. So for example, it's got an SME Climate Hub commitment guide that lets you get into the commitment in a little bit more detail. It's got a reporting guide and a survey that goes into our kind of most recent question set to SMEs, and it really helps you understand, what motivates them, what are their barriers, all those really key points. Then we've also got guidance and information on how to engage your SMEs. So this is an engagement guide, a one-pager that you can send to SMEs, and a welcome letter template. And we have a place you can go to track your SMEs, and I'll get into that in a little bit in a minute, just to give you just a little bit more information on that one. So to pull up one of our guides here, our commitment guide, this really lets you understand the commitment in a bit more detail, and it sort of pulls all that together. So it gives you a bit more information on the commitment, and it gives you a kind of walkthrough of what it means for an SME to make that commitment. That could be very helpful if you're talking to an SME or communicating with an SME about this. now. And then the other page I wanted to highlight to you is the RSMEs page. This can be a really, really useful page for if you're trying to track SME activity and commitment activity. You can filter it by different things. So if you're trying to get SMEs in a particular region to commit, in a particular sector to commit, you can kind of filter for that. You can change and filter it by commitment date. So I've done it here. But you'll see that I can filter it and make it so that it shows the most recent commitments. So you can almost filter down this information to say, okay, I'm really interested. I've sent out communications to SMEs in this region. I'd like to see if there's been any activity, and this can really help you get that information really quickly. So I'm going to take you back to the supporters page now, and really move on after the getting started. And I just wanted to talk you through those resources because we have a few of them in a few different places. So I just thought that would be really helpful. Then the next really key point is engaging your SMEs. So I think this is the step that a lot of you might be at. And it's really using all the guidance that I just talked through, and all this information to start thinking about how you take the kind of simple steps to start engaging your SMEs. So this would be, everything from identifying your SMEs to thinking about the best way to contact them. That could be through social media, that could be through emails, that could be through events or meetings or other ways you have of contacting that group. Keep it really friendly and supportive. This is often a big step for SMEs, so it's really important to keep that kind of friendly, supportive tone. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's so much more powerful if you pair it with support and capacity building. And so highlighting here that, we've got two webinars for SMEs running on the 17th of October at different times, so we can make sure that SMEs from across the globe can come to those webinars. And those will be a way for us to talk through the SME Climate Hub, how to use our free tools, and really give those SMEs kind of like a little bit more information and the ability to ask us some questions, which is always really great. And then it's also very powerful to pair it with your own incentives. So those could be everything from things like contractual benefits to promotional activities, but things that help incentivize those SMEs to take climate action and to take climate action now and make the commitment. And we have tools on there to help you with that engagement. So there's an email template that you can download, and we also have a social media and communications pack. And I just wanted to bring up that pack for you because it has broken down in it lots of information about how you could do different social posts on different platforms, suggested text, but I think it's really, really good to highlight that it also has posts to encourage SMEs to make the SME climate commitment, so what we've been talking about, but it also has posts for you to kind of promote your leadership and encourage others to take the same action across your networks. So it's got sort of quite a lot of information in it, and it's a really useful resource. And then the final piece that I wanted to highlight was nominating your SMEs to take to kind of be featured in SME Climate Hub case studies and even potentially in events. This nomination survey is the next step on the supporters page, and I'll bring it up. It's a simple survey. The deadline for it is the 7th of October, and the idea behind it is that you will nominate SMEs, really leading SMEs who you think are great examples, should be case studied, should be featured for the brilliant climate work that they're doing. They also need to be committed SMEs, so they need to have made the commitment, and this is the way to get them kind of profiled and nominate them for potentially being in case studies and events. So I'm going to stop sharing. and just say I've given you loads of information, but I just wanted to highlight the most important thing, which is engage your SME networks, value chains. That's really what we want you to do. Use that unique link that we've given you so that we can track it better. And do invite your SMEs along to our webinars for them on the 17th. We'll also obviously share recordings afterwards, so it can be shared later, but I think it's really brilliant to give them the opportunity to ask those questions. And now I'm going to hand over to Pamela for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Okay, so now that we've gone through all these resources and the guidance that's available to campaign supporters, we'd love to hear from you. Once again, this is meant to be an interactive discussion, so we want to understand what, first of all, if you have any questions on any of that we went through. If there's something that's missing from your perspective, and there's more that we could do to help you engage your SMEs, we're actually going to start with a second poll question, which is precisely about what would help you engage and mobilize SMEs to make the SME climate commitment. So again, we really welcome your thoughts and suggestions. And as we all think through this specific question, I want to open up the conversation. Once again, feel free to ask any questions about the platform, the resources that we just went through. We can also provide more details on how you might want to use these tools to engage your SMEs. There are different ways for you to contribute to the discussion. You can raise your hand, of course, and I'd be very happy to take your questions live. Please also feel free to post them in the chat box, and we can answer them as we go. So both options are equally valid, and I'll be monitoring the chat box and also the participant list. Okay, so it looks like we have one first question in the chat box. What business size are you targeting greater than 250 employees? That's a great question. So as a matter of fact, the SME climate commitment is open to any organization with fewer than 500 employees. We use a very broad definition because we have a global remit. We work with all regions across the world, and so we want to make sure that as many SMEs as possible can engage with us, make the commitment, and by making the commitment can also join the Race to Zero campaign. We have a lot of very small SMEs, of course, that are using the hub. A large part of our community members have less than 20, even less than 10 employees, but we also have larger SMEs, so towards that, the end of the spectrum, more towards the 500 employee mark, that have made the commitment and joined our community. So hopefully that answers the first question. Tessa, no worries. Thank you very much for joining. I know you need to jump off, but great to have you as official supporter of the campaign. Once again, if there are any other questions, both the chat box and the little icon, raise hand icon, are available to you. Just going to give it a few more minutes. And maybe while we wait, we can also provide a little more information on some key aspects of the campaign. So some of you might be wondering, so you've heard from Lydia on the links that are available, the unique links that we're providing to campaign supporters. Some of you might be wondering how you'll be able to know how many SMEs from your network are making the commitment. Well, this is something that we'll be monitoring through those unique links that you're provided with, and we will make sure to provide an update before the next campaign supporter webinar that is currently scheduled for mid-October. We have several other questions because there's also the Q&A section. Thank you for flagging, Natalie. So a question from Philippine. Are you thinking on creating incentives? For instance, a grant for more ambitious ones or partnership with big companies to engage with their supply chains? That's really, really a good question, Philippine. So, first of all, as part of this campaign, we're trying to provide as many comms benefits as possible to both SMEs and campaign supporters. And that's one of the reasons why we're encouraging campaign supporters to nominate SMEs from their networks and value chains so that we can spotlight these SMEs as part of, case studies, our communication campaign, the one that we're going to run in the lead up to COP29. There's going to be speaking opportunities, media opportunities. And so we hope that this is going to act as an incentive for SMEs, of course, but also for campaign supporters, because we'll be highlighting campaign momentum in the coming weeks. We'll be looking at how many SMEs join. We'll be inviting you, obviously, to contribute, to participate in our communication campaign. And so there will be opportunities on that front as well. We're also always happy to set up more in-depth partnerships with larger organizations. And as a matter of fact, you'll be hearing from IKEA in just a few minutes, with whom we have a very in-depth partnership. We've been working together over the past couple of years to engage SMEs that work with IKEA, their small business clients. And so we are always happy to explore partnerships, both with large corporates, but also financial institutions, business networks. This is a conversation that we can take offline. And feel free. We're already in touch with the CODIS, as a matter of fact, Philippine, as you might know, but we can definitely have an additional discussion. Looking at what else we have. So many messages being posted. Let's see. So this Karen from the University of British Columbia that's sharing her experience, I believe. Measuring emissions is a key starting point. We have started an SME climate clinic. That's great at UBC's business school, like a tax clinic. And looks like you're reaching about 20 SMEs a year now, hoping to scale to about 100. If we could roll this across our province or in Canada and beyond, that would be powerful. Fully agree, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing this experience. And we also have another question from the Net Zero Action Accelerator. Have you come across any research on access to climate funding beyond corporate support available to SMEs, categorized by geographic region? So that's very specific. We are, among other things, a knowledge partner of the OECD platform for financing SMEs for sustainability. They do some really, really interesting research and publish reports on a regular basis. So that's definitely something that's available, and I think that those reports can be downloaded from the OECD website. We haven't done any research ourselves beyond the survey that Lydia mentioned earlier, where we try and understand the barriers and motivators of SMEs in taking climate action. We're hoping to do more in the coming months and next year as well, so joining forces with other organizations to really act as a thought leader in the space. I mean, the SME climate action space, but that's obviously very much connected to climate funding. So watch this space and we'll see if we can provide any updates going forward. So we have another couple of minutes for any additional questions. I know Karen, as a matter of fact, posted another really interesting comment early on during the webinar, talking about the challenges that they have and the fact that SMEs are often very lean from a scope 1 and 2 point of view. So, one of the challenges is they need to focus on their scope 3 emissions. And of course, that is hard to influence. It's hard enough for large businesses, but even more so for smaller businesses. That's one of the reasons why we try and provide resources on the hub to help SMEs address these supply chain emissions. We're conscious it's a challenge. We'll be doing more going forward. Lydia, is there anything you'd like to say on this specific point?
Maybe that I think the action space that we're going to be launching might help with SMEs with getting ideas. It won't help with that very true influence point, but it will help them with getting ideas. And then as we develop our reporting, I think it's going to be very interesting to think about influence and what are the actions an SME can effectively take and track in the realm of scope 3. So I think that's something that's very much on my mind as something that we'll be working on next year. because it's going to be a really tricky point for SMEs. It's not that they can't do anything, but they are going to have to be, we're going to have to be practical in what kind of influence they can have, versus a really large multinational.
Great. If you have another question, now's the time, because I'm looking at the clock. We're going to have to move on to the next section of the webinar. We have two incredible speakers with us. I want to make sure that they can share their experience. And as a matter of fact, that might help answer some of the questions that you have on how to best engage SMEs. So unless we might have something else in the Q&A. Okay, one last question. How will reported emissions be tackled over the years to see progress? So I'm not entirely sure I fully understand that question. Lydia, looks like you want to jump in.
I'm mentioning it's tracked over the years to see progress. And this is the first year that we're getting 2 years worth of emissions, because we launched reporting tool last year, and we're currently collecting the next set of emissions. So we're really interested in this. I think that there's kind of two ways we will go at it. So one is we're going to look at year-on-year emissions for the SMEs, begin to understand if we can see trends, any of those things, and really begin to understand kind of SME climate action and emissions reporting in a bit more depth, because you need a few years of data to do that. The other side of it is, I think that as we build out kind of reporting and measurement next year, I think it'll be really interesting to help SMEs to track that as well. And so we'll be thinking about how we could maybe create trackers for SMEs on, as they report and disclose their emissions to us, how we can kind of create tracking for them so they can see how they're doing versus their targets as well. So both of those are things that we're really excited about.
Great. Thank you very much, Lydia. Okay, so I think we've reached the end of this Q&A section. If you have additional questions, please do reach out even after the webinar. Maybe my colleagues can post our info email address in the chat box so that you know which email address to use. Please add SME Climate Ambition Drive in the subject line so that we can prioritize your queries. Of course, we know that this is all time sensitive, as we're hoping to really increase the number of commitments by COP, but do reach out if you have additional questions. So that brings us to our last two speakers, Louise and Thomas. Thank you very much to the participants, of course, for all your questions. And now I think that Louise, once again, director at the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and Thomas, who's global sustainability leader at IKEA, they're going to tell us a little bit more about how they've been working with SMEs to engage them. Exponential Roadmap is a co-founding partner of the SME Climate Hub, and IKEA is one of our key corporate partners. So obviously they're both well versed in SME decarbonization. Very much look forward to hearing from them both. So over to you guys.
Thank you so much. I will get started with just a little bit of a short pitch of my background and how I think about working with SMEs in our huge value chain that we have, and then I'll hand over to Thomas. So I have a background in the telco industry, large corp. I've been working there with the topic of supplier engagement since about 2017. And I find it incredibly interesting. It's super hard, but it's so interesting. And I come from a background of IT and systematics, so I think of it as a great, huge, big, complex system that we have within the value chain and all its actors. Every part that we have currently in this system has a place, and SMEs definitely have a place. We have more than 300 million SMEs in the world. It's massive. And they are the foundation of the economy, foundation for big corps to work, and also origin of the economy. Apart from they need to reduce their emissions, and build their resilience, but also think about the massive upskilling when it comes to sustainability if we get to engage, even if you are reaching out to 10, 20, 100,000, 10,000 SMEs, however you do it, depending on your capability and size. There is a massive upskilling with all those SMEs working on climate action. But also many of the SMEs that you have in your supply chain and that are out there in the world, they are going to be the ones with the solutions that we want to have for the future, that we want to have on this new market that is more sustainable than what we have right now. And for you, you need to work with it because you have to fulfill your requirements and working with climate action. So you have to get them on board. It's quite hard. That's why we have this amazing platform, which is best in class, both for you, as Lydia was showing you just now, and also for the SMEs that you have in your supply chain. They can get very far without any cost to them when it comes to getting this type of support. And recommendation is just to get started, but make it not too difficult. And that's why we have this, as Pamela said, non-stop shop where they can get support without the one-to-one interaction, because that will hinder you in order to get this kind of scale that we need to get with SMEs. You may have 95% of the value chain stakeholders that you have, maybe SMEs. So just getting started, that wasn't very much of what I've been doing. It was more of my thoughts around it, but I think it's better if I now hand over to Thomas, who have been working with this from IKEA perspective, done a fantastic work. But I want to please also encourage you to raise questions after Thomas has been talking to Thomas and about this, because this is the time to ask questions. You'll have a lot of people that can give very good answers. But Thomas, over to you. What have you been doing from IKEA perspective when it comes to this area?
Thank you so much. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Super excited to share a few of the things that we have been doing. As I said, my name is Thomas. I work at Inca, which is a part of the big IKEA family. Specifically, I work with the IKEA retail. So we are the biggest retailer in the IKEA franchise system, operating around 500 stores in 35 countries. And with that size and that reach, with having billions of visitors visiting our website, having almost 700 million people visiting our stores, we felt that there is a kind of responsibility to actually also to take action, to encourage, to educate, to also share the things that we have been doing. And so it was quite obvious that we say, okay, with the size that we're having and the realization how the big part SMEs actually play when it comes to tackling climate change, that there was a good match between what we can do and what our dear friends at the SME Climate Hub can do. So we looked a little bit around how do we set this partnership up that we started approximately 2 years ago when we started to work together. And we looked at, okay, we have more than 100 million businesses shopping at IKEA. Some of them are registered at a customer club, some of them are not. In fact, the vast majority is not. And we were at that stage starting a new IKEA business network, which is basically a loyalty club for business customers where they get different kind of perks, depending on what country you're in. But this is something that we have rolled out over the last couple of years, and we just rounded 3 million members. So we have this reach where we actually can reach out to our business customers. At the same time, we saw the huge opportunity to have those resources available to them on the SME Climate Hub. So that's why we started the collaboration, and we wanted to frame it in a way where we could say, okay, how can we address it in a good way for our business customers? So we started to frame that really that Inca Group is supporting our business customers to build climate action, but also build resilience for the future. As we've heard before, small companies are especially also quite resilience when it comes to the effects of climate change and playing a big role. So at that point, we didn't really know how to actually start and build it. So we actually said, okay, we just get going. We just start and get going. So what did we do? We actually did the first thing that we did is that we did an announcement that we said, okay, yes, Inca Group, we are taking this topic serious. We will reach out to our business customers and we will start actually talking about climate change and their role in the topic. So we developed an MVP, you could say, where we basically created a space where we talk about the SME Climate Hub on our IKEA website. We created a 3-step email campaign that we made available for a selected number of markets. The first one was really about creating awareness. This is your role. This is what we are doing. Let's do something together. The second one was then more about the role of SMEs, sharing some insights from research that we've done together with a couple of partners to see, okay, what is it actually that SMEs think about climate change? How aware are they around their role? And the third one was then more connected, okay, are there solutions that IKEA can provide to be part of making them a little bit? What was quite interesting to see is that we did a step-by-step approach where we launched in the markets where the SME Climate Hub was available in the local language. We started with the UK and Ireland, and we followed up with Spain. And since then, we've added on Australia, the US, and also India recently, with more markets to come. When we looked at the performance of those emails, it was actually quite interesting because we did see that, you could say, performance was quite close to the commercial emails that we send out when we promote products or services, when it comes to the opening rate, when it comes to the click-through rate, etc., etc. So there was a quite interesting part where we were actually quite positively surprised. What we also learned afterwards is that they expect IKEA to play a bigger role. So it's not just a lead campaign to send them to the SME Climate Hub, but they actually want IKEA to take a bigger role, to share more resources, to share tips and ideas. And that's something that we are working on right now. We did some more detailed research looking at both at data, but also did some interviews with small, medium-sized businesses. And they expect us to be a bit of a translator, using easy language, helping them on the way, also being aware that they're not as mature as many other SMEs that are already on the SME Climate Hub. Imagine you're a small company about to shop some things for your office, then you get these messages around climate change and let's start taking action. Of course, there is some work to do to mature and to learn about your role, to do, okay, what is it actually that I can do with my small business? So we've been on an incredible learning journey together with our colleagues from the SME Climate Hub, and the journey is continued. And for us, it's more important to do things, learn along the way, rather than build something to perfection and launch in the far distant future. So it's learning on the go and building something great together. And I actually think I'll leave it at that for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Thomas. First of all, what were the reactions from the SMEs? You said there was they answered quite well, but were there positive reactions or?
Yeah. So what we could see is that one thing that we can see from the data perspective, where we see, okay, there are how many did open the mail, how many did click the mail, how many followed through the link on the IKEA website, and how many did actually went to the SME Climate Hub. So there we could see that the performance was good. We also did a couple of checks where they were positive towards the message, but where they also didn't fully understand, okay, what is my role? So there is an educational piece to do where we really want to build more content on the IKEA website to prepare them before they come to the SME Climate Hub, using both the things that we have been doing in IKEA, but also small things that they can do, utilizing our range and our services. So the overall reception is quite positive. What we also see is that there is more work to do to get them to the level, because we do know that it's difficult to do the commitment, not difficult, but it's there's a certain barrier until you get there, because you need to have a certain amount of maturity, there's need a certain amount of commitment. And what we could see both from the interviews that we have been doing, but also from the traffic data, is that the typical customer that we are reaching, because we're not going through our supply chain, we're going through customers business customers who shop at IKEA is that they tend to spend less time when they go to the SME Climate Hub, and that they use less of the tools that they're having, which implies that they are not as far on the journey as they are there, which is a great opportunity for us to actually to keep the conversation going. And luckily, we have a very engaged CEO, Jesper Bodin, who has been helping to promote it through an opinion piece together with Maria, but also bringing the topic further in his conversations.
Yeah, management support, one of the key pieces you need to get in place in order to make this work.
Absolutely.
But are there any specific tools that you would recommend from the SME Climate Hub? What are the kind of the best ones that you see?
From the research that we have done is that many SMEs are really keen on the carbon footprint calculator. So that is a quite good one, because that is that's a tool that usually has a quite high cost factor. What we also know from the interviews that we have done is there is an interesting dynamic where on the one hand side, they really want to do actions, they want to do something, they want to see a result here and now, but they're also a bit hesitant in reporting and putting all those things in. So there is this kind of interest dynamic where they want to do something, where they are action oriented, where they also expect some short-term returns or improvements or reductions, so that they have this success criteria. And at the same time, there is a little bit of resistance to actually to do the reporting and to do the work, because they don't really know exactly what it will bring them and what it will mean for them. So interesting dynamics to explore together with SMEs.
So I think maybe a final question here. I don't see that we have gotten any from the audience, but what would your recommendation be for those that are just getting started on this journey, those that are going to reach out to customers or suppliers?
I think the first thing is to understand and to know who is it that you're reaching out to, using easy, understandable language, being aware that not everybody is as aware of the topic as we are, that have been working with SMEs and with climate change for a very long time. So you have, depending on how big your target group is, you will have a lot of different maturity levels. You will have a lot of different knowledge levels, a lot of different resource levels. So what I believe is important to pick them up at the right spot, than rather taking it a little bit too easy, reaching the ones that are maybe in the very beginning of the journey or not even have started, and then actually take them on the journey together with you. Also showing the things that you have been doing, because that builds trust. So it's also about walking the talk. So it's not just about, okay, we expect you to take climate action, but bringing a good balance in between, okay, here are the things that we have done, come join us on the journey.
All right, I think you have done such fantastic work, and I look forward to how it's going in the future, to hear more about it. So now I hand over to you, Pamela, again. So thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you so much, Louise and Thomas. It's obviously an absolute pleasure to be working with IKEA on this campaign, and we've learned so much with you along the way. I think that you've just provided some really, really valuable advice to all our campaign supporters. So we obviously very much look forward to working with all of you in the coming weeks to reach this ambitious target that we have, 10,000 committed SMEs by COP29. You've heard a lot today, of course. I just posted our info email address in the chat box so that you can reach out if you have any additional questions. Just a bit of a recap of the next steps and actions that you can take in the coming weeks, as you will have heard from my colleagues. First of all, of course, please do encourage your SMEs to make the SME climate commitment on the hub. Use that unique link that you can find in your supporter confirmation email. If you use that link in your communications to SMEs, we'll be able to understand, where SMEs are coming from when they reach the hub and make the commitment. So that's really helpful. As Thomas was saying, please feel free to add any additional information, of course. Feel free to integrate this into your quarantine activities, any programs that you're running for your suppliers, your members, depending on the type of organization that you are. Feel free to add any incentives, of course, that will go a long way in encouraging SMEs to come on board. Then, of course, you can spread the word. We count on you. We've created that social media kit. You have the link in the chat box. You can use that kit to share your leadership as a campaign supporter. As we were saying before, we will be highlighting campaign momentum in the coming weeks, in the coming months. So we'll be featuring campaign supporters as part of that. We'll keep you updated on any communications and media opportunities as well, so you can benefit from being part of the campaign. And then we'll be holding not only another webinar for campaign supporters in October, but also a webinar targeted at SMEs. And you can invite your SMEs to this webinar that is going to take place on October the 17th. It will help SMEs understand why it's important to make the commitment on the hub, but also help them understand how they can use the tools and resources that are available on the platform. We'll follow up via email to share more details about this webinar, but I think you might have a link in the chat box for that too. And obviously, once you start seeing SMEs from your network, from your supply chains, value chains making the commitment, we definitely invite you to nominate SMEs, ideally SME leaders from your network, so that they have a chance to be featured, as we were saying, in our case studies, events. We can also put them forward as possible spokespeople for media opportunities. So we have a form that you must remember from Lydia's presentation that's going to allow you to nominate SMEs. The deadline for this is the 7th of October. Once again, if you have any questions about that process, do reach out. And for those of you who haven't shared their logos yet, please do, so that we can add them to the Drive campaign page that we have on the website. You're already listed as campaign supporters on that page, but we'd be very happy to feature your logos as well. I think we're at time, even over time, so I'm just going to thank you all once again for engaging with us, for being campaign supporters. I think we can achieve a lot of impact together. We'll be sharing a recording of this webinar as a follow-up as well, in case you want to re-watch it or share it with anyone. And we very much look forward to working with you. Thanks again to you all, and speak very soon.